This is Cosmic News. Timeline is Sunday, the 2nd of November 2014. Welcome along, my friends, to another edition of Cosmic News. Coming up in this week's broadcast, decision time. With sightings of NIBIRU being reported daily around our planet, it's time to decide, do you plan to survive this event or not? Also, some survival tips from the informer, plus the informer to call it a day. Goodbye to informer news and cosmic news within weeks, and CDC hints that Ebola virus could well be airborne, as CDC suggests hermetically sealed caskets for Ebola victims. Okay, into this week's news. This first report is a Cosmic News presentation. So with sightings of NIBIRU, or objects coming in with NIBIRU being reported from around our planet daily, it's time to decide if you want to survive this coming horrific event or not. From the beginning, I've always stated it won't be easy for anybody to survive this approaching destructive event. We just have to look around our incredible blue planet and the many sunken cities being located around it that bear testament to how destructive this coming apocalyptic event will be. To even try and survive an event that we will all witness very soon will be near impossible. But if you are fit, well, and up to the challenge, then I'm 100% behind you. The first step is to decide the best and safest location to head for, that is at least 1,000 feet above sea level, that has not got any volcanic fault lines nearby. Once you have decided on the location, you should spend many hours researching the best survival websites that offer the best information on how to survive an apocalyptic event and what you will need to increase your chances of survival. When you have accumulated all the best info, draw up a detailed plan on how you plan to survive from the start to the finish, including the cost of survival gear and food and water supplies to last you many months. I've always stated in the initial start of this event, you will need to be in a cave that will withstand very high wind speeds, as well as room enough for you to store all your survival gear and food. But one thing I've never mentioned is, it would be advisable to have some kind of boat, as many high elevation locations will become isolated and surrounded by flood water once the pole shift occurs. Now, if you have a boat, you could widen your exploration zone after the event by many miles. You could also use the boat for fishing as well. But the advantages of having your survival location surrounded by flood water is that you will be in a far safer location, less likely to be attacked by a panicking horde of people. We all know, or should know by this time, that this event will be horrific and off the scale in destructive events. And you must bear in mind that even if you survive it, you could still succumb to illness, from minor illnesses to life-threatening illnesses, within 6 months after this event unfolds. These first few months that follow the event will be very cold, in fact freezing, due to the sun being blocked out by volcanic ash surrounding our atmosphere. That will cause the temperature of the planet to plummet and could well cause an ice age. Another threat to consider is Ebola and how to avoid catching this airborne virus. If your survival location is surrounded by flood water after the event, then that will increase your chances of not contracting this deadly virus. I also advise you all to have a biogerm warfare suit, so if you come across this virus, at least you can better protect yourselves. So that's the main survival tips for this week. Now it's decision time. Should you decide to try and survive this coming event or not? If you don't want to even try, which I've decided would be a better option for me, as I am now 64 and my health is not 100%. So I'm going to enjoy what little time I have left, and I'd like to make this following announcement. I've now been putting out reports and warning you all of this coming events on and off since around the year 2003, and I hope all the information that I've put out in my countless videos has been of value to you all. But I've come to the decision that I intend to retire from video posting in January of 2015. I feel time is slipping away from us all, and I need time to prepare myself spiritually and physically for this coming horrific event. So as from the last week in January of 2015, my last video will be aired on YouTube. I hope you will all take the opportunity to download as many of my videos as you can and make them all viral, as the information in them is of great value to the people of this planet. And in time the powers that be might decide to take my YouTube channel down. I do wish each and every one of you all the best in the future. Also, I'd like to thank you all for your steadfast support of what I've been trying to do in these past years, informing as many people as possible of these coming events, and hope I've managed to save many lives as this event unfolds. As many of you know, I'm a big believer in life after death, and one day I do hope to see you all on the flip side of life. There is no end, only the physical body dies. Our spirits just move from this 3D dimension to the next dimension of life. Well, my friends, it's been a privilege for me to put out my weekly news reports to you for the past decade plus. And one day we will meet on the other side of life. God bless each and every one of you. The Informer, Cosmic News. This following report originates from ZetaTalk.com, the ZetaTalk newsletter, issue 417, and this was posted on Sunday, September the 28th, 2014, titled Dark Twin Passing. The Dark Twin is elusive, as it is a cold black planet that only on occasions reflects blue and yellow light. It was seen as a blue-yellow planet in early 2004 when it came out from behind the Sun when the Earth's orbit was halted by Planet X. It changed to a violet colour in 2011 and 2012, which the Zetas explain was due to the blue light reflected by the dark twin mixed with the red dust in the tail of Planet X wafting about. It was captured on the 28th of March 2010 before dawn, looking west and out behind and beyond the Earth in the orbit she shares with the dark twin. It was captured on September the 7th, 2011, just after sundown, also looking west. It had been most recently captured on December the 30th, 2012, this time looking east. ZetaTalk described the 19th of the 4th, 2004, what it is about the colour black that makes it dark, unseen. It absorbs light, almost entirely, reflected little, and as a dead planet without water, without atmosphere, without vegetation correlation, there is nothing on the dark twin to change this. Why does the dark twin appear on the horizon briefly as a large yellow planet, the colour and size changing back and forth to a tiny blue star? These are the colours least absorbed by the twin, thus most reflected. ZetaTalk explanation, the 10th of the 4th, 2010. While the dark twin has been to the side of the Earth, such that light would not reflect from the Sun to the Earth, as the sunlight would be returning directly to the Sun. It now has pushed back outside their shared orbit, so the opportunity for the reflected sunlight to reach the Earth has increased. ZetaTalk explanation, the 17th of the 9th, 2011. The sunset photo taken on September the 7th, 2011, where a faint purple orb appeared to the right of the sun, and before the sun had set, it is as suspected a capture of the dark twin. The dark twin shares the Earth's orbit, and this orb is seen along the line of the ecliptic, close to the horizon at 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. along that line, when the sun is still higher in the sky at an angle to the left. The dark twin looks purple or violet, as the blue light it normally emits is mixing with the red dust in the atmosphere. As those who study colour are aware, blue and red mixed together produce a purple colour. Is the dark twin being pushed closer to the Earth? The cup it shares with the Earth and Venus tightening at this time. It is indeed, and this drama is only starting to play out. Zeta Talk prediction, 14th of the 4th, 2012. At present, the twin is caught behind the Earth in their shared orbit and moving along outside of their orbit behind the Earth out in space. It is trying to evade conflict with the Earth by dropping below the ecliptic somewhat as it attempts to slide past the Earth. Now the dark twin has been captured again by an Italian webcam. There are several captures, most dramatic on September the 1st, 2014 at 2200 hours and 2300 hours. And again on September the 2nd, 2014 at 2300 hours. Almost midnight at this time, the moon was overhead. It also made an appearance on August the 25th, 2014 at 2200 hours, but as an object so faint as to almost pass notice. On this date, the moon is not in the skies at all. Zeta Talk explanation, the 13th of the 9th, 2014. We predicted that the dark twin would try to pass the Earth in their shared orbit, moving out further into space and sliding behind the Earth. The dark twin is affected by the sweeping arm of the sun, forever pushed forward in their shared orbit. But unlike the Earth, the dark twin is not a magnetic planet, and thus is not caught in the grip of Planet X as firmly as is the Earth. In these webcam photos, the dark twin seems to move about, and this is due to the blooming effect, light pulled towards Earth's gravity, and likely also the moon's gravity. In that it is seen on August the 25th dimly, when the moon is not in the skies. This is not a ghost of the moon in the camera. The uneven lighting, where one side of the dark twin is brighter than another, is explained by where reflected light goes. Those light rays reflected back towards Earth come from the side facing Earth. The dark twin still behind the Earth in their shared orbit. Light rays from the sun hitting the dark twin on the side away from the Earth bounce off into space and thus are only dimly seen from Earth. Where this 2014 view is looking west, the dark twin is still not quite directly behind the Earth as yet. Russia adjusts. China's certainly been posturing for migration assaults, the pole shift and the flooding and climate change in the after-time. They are in dispute over a worthless island chain strictly to protect their perimeter, and they have constructed ghost cities where they can move their populace inland away from the coastlines. Has Russia likewise been obviously posturing for migration assaults, the pole shift and the flooding and climate change in the after times? Let's start with their plan to move to the far east of Russia. Medvedev instructed to send the offices of large state-owned companies in the Far East, February the 5th, 2014, ntv.ru. Today, the Prime Minister instructed a transfer to the Far East, a number of large state-owned companies and their federal bodies of executive power. Proposals for the Far East, which will be created in the advanced development of the territory, the government should prepare to June 15th. Zeta Talk comment, 8th of the 2nd, 2014. Zeta-Talk has from the start of the Zeta-Talk saga in 1995 stated that Siberia will be flooded. The world flooded in the after times to an average height of 675 feet, as the flood map clearly shows, except for a hill lock near Moscow and the Ural Mountains. Russia will have to migrate to its eastern sectors to be above the waves in the after time. Russia has highlighted a plenty there, and there are lands which will be more tropical and temperate than Russia has been in the past. A boom to their survivors. Russia's Far East is underpopulated due to the coal, so can absorb its migrating population in the future when crops will flourish there. The Russian government takes Zeta-Talk seriously, as do the Chinese, and these steps to move their government functions to their eastern sectors should be no surprise. Now, in addition to its naval base on the Crimea, Russia is establishing a new naval base on the new Siberian islands, which are coincidentally just above the far east lands of Russia. Russia Navy sends flotilla to Arctic to start permanent service at a military base, September the 6th, 2014, RT.com. Russian military base Arctic. The major goal of the latest expedition of the Northern Fleet ships to the Arctic to deliver personnel, equipment and property of the North Fleet's tactical group, which starting this year is going to fulfill military service at the new Siberian islands on a permanent base. And to the west, abutting Europe, Russia has achieved its goal in the Ukraine, which will allow it to run ships from the Crimea up over the flooded lands of western Russia after the pole shift, ensuring, per the Zetas, that Russia's retreat of its heavily populated western regions will not be attacked from the rear. Ukraine deal imposes the truce Putin devised, April 5, 2014, nytimes.com. World Europe Ukraine ceasefire, HTML. After 5 months of intensifying combat that threatened to rip Ukraine apart and to reignite the Cold War, the Ukrainian government and separatist forces signed a ceasefire agreement. The main thrust of the plan was not just endorsed, but laid out by President Vladimir V. Putin of Russia. Zeta-Talk Insight, 19th of the 4th, 2014. Were China is focused on blocking migration from drowning India and countries on the sinking Sunda Plate, Russia has a broad border with Europe that will be massively flooded in the after time. How are these lands central to Russia's defense in the after time? The massive flooding that will occur within 2 years after the pole shift due to the rising sea levels reacting to frictional heated ocean bottoms will devastate Europe and western Russia. Russia will migrate its populace to eastern Russia, but will remain on the highlands near Moscow, on the highlands of the Crimea, on the highlands near Sochi, and in the Urals. How will these lands be defended? While Russia moves hundreds of millions of its people to the east, the Crimea is Russia's main naval base, and the flooding Volga and Don rivers will provide an inlet to the flooded lands of western Russia. Russia will defend its rear as it migrates by the boat. US prepares. The US has likewise been preparing for this coming catalysm and the rioting expected in its cities. It is no secret that the continuity of government issue has focused on Denver CO, where many federal agencies have migrated and where rumours of underground facilities and tunnels have long tantalised conspiracy theories. The greatest concentration of federal agencies outside of Washington, D.C. is at the Denver Federal Center. To view the full transcript, go to my website, endtimes23.com, where I've posted the link. There's a live link to my website near the end of this video. This next report originates from DCClothesline.com, titled Airborne. CDC now confirms concern of airborne transmission of Ebola. This was posted on August the 5th, 2014 by Paul Joseph Watson. Federal agency directs airline staff to prevent spread of infectious material through the air. Despite repeated assurances that the Ebola virus cannot be transmitted via airborne particles, the CDC is concerned about that very outcome and has directed airline staff to take steps to prevent the spread of infectious materials through the air. While Ebola is highly contagious, the risk of a full-blown pandemic has been downplayed by health authorities because, according to our current understanding of the virus, Ebola is not airborne and is transmitted through contact with bodily fluids, including sweat and blood. However, with concern rising that the current strain of the virus, which is the worst in history, has killed 887 people plus, could in fact be airborne, the Centers for Disease Control has implemented steps to prevent its spread via international air travel. A CDC advisory entitled Interim Guidance About Ebola Virus Infections for Airline Flight Crews, Cleaning Personnel and Cargo Personnel reveals that the federal agency is concerned about airborne contamination. The advisory urges airline staff to provide surgical masks to potential Ebola victims in order to reduce the number of droplets expelled into the air by talking, sneezing or coughing. Emphasis mine. The CDC is also directing airline cleaning personnel to not use compressed air, which might spread infectious material through the air. Emphasis mine. The CDC's concern about Ebola virus being spread via the air is understandable in light of a 2012 experiment conducted by Canadian scientists which proved that the Ebola virus could be transmitted by air between species. Researchers demonstrated that the virus could be transmitted from pigs to monkeys without any direct contact by placing the two animals in pens separated only by a wire barrier. After 8 days, some of the monkeys were found to have symptoms of Ebola, likely as a result of inhaling large aerosol droplets produced from the respiratory tracts of the pigs. The results of the study led scientists to conclude that limited airborne transmission might be contributing to the spread of the disease in some parts of Africa, although they cautioned against making comparisons to the airborne nature of the influenza viruses. In addition, the Public Health Agency of Canada's official website states under a section entitled Mode of Transmission that the airborne spread among humans is strongly suspected, although it has not yet been conclusively demonstrated. The potential for a new strain of the Ebola virus to achieve airborne transmission only serves to cast further doubts on the logic of the United States choosing to import 2 Ebola sufferers into the country. As we reported last week, President Barack Obama signed an amendment to executive order which allows health authorities to detain Americans who merely show signs of respiratory illness. The CDC has also outlined measures for dealing with an outbreak of communicable diseases, which allows for the quarantine of well persons who do not show symptoms of the disease. This final report also originates from DCClothesline.com, titled CDC suggests hermetically sealed caskets for Ebola victims, aka FEMA coffins. And this was posted on October the 8th, 2014 by Brandon Smith. I remember years back when I was still writing for my original website, nethercorp.us, we came across a then little known video of airtight coffin liners, hundreds of thousands stacked in a field in the middle of Madison, Georgia, in close proximity to Atlanta and the home of the CDC. We helped break the story, which immediately swept through independent media circles. Owners of the property leased to store the hermetically sealed plastic coffins stated that it was the CDC that had rented the land for storage of the coffins. Confirmation from the CDC has not been forthcoming. I have been keeping my eye open for any mention of these kind of coffins since that story was released, knowing that one day they would suddenly be touted by the government as if they had always been in use. It appears that day is close at hand. In a story for Yahoo News, the CDC says that in the event of an Ebola outbreak in the US, bodies of the deceased would be required to be buried within hermetically sealed caskets, which would prevent the escape of microbes during funerals. An administrator of the Dallas Institute of Funeral Service interviewed in the article stated that he had never come across any such caskets in his industry, meaning hermetically sealed coffins are not common in the slightest for burial. The CDC coffins in Madison, Georgia, though, are designed to prevent spread of infection. In fact, the patent for these coffins confirms that they are meant for the burial or cremation of bodies exposed to infectious diseases. This would suggest that the CDC has stockpiled such coffins in places like Madison, Georgia, specifically in preparation for a viral outbreak, meaning the CDC has been expecting the deaths of hundreds of thousands of Americans due to infection for at least the past 6 years. That is a long period of preparation. Such preparation requires certainty, not hypothesis, especially where the federal government is involved. Our government was so certain of a viral catastrophe, they purchased fields full of sealing coffins to be ready for it, not to prevent it, but to have the means to clean up after it. Let that thought settle for a moment and then read my latest article. An Ebola outbreak would be advantageous for globalists to understand the bigger picture. Okay, my friends, you're all invited to join this channel by subscribing to End Times 23, which is a totally free subscription service. You're also invited to add me as a friend on Facebook and follow me on Twitter. If you'd like to drop me a line on my blog, by all means do so, or if you'd like to join one of my circles in Google+, the links are under this video. All this week's news links can be found on my website, endtimes23.com. There's a live link near the end of this video. Well, that's your lot for this week, my friends. I do hope you've enjoyed the show. I'll be back with you in a week's time with another edition of Informer News. So until then, this is your Informer signing off, friends. I'll see you on the flip side. Offer the best information on how to survive an apocalyptic event and what you will need to increase your chances of survival. When you have accumulated all the best info, draw up a detailed plan and how you plan to survive. from the start to the finish, including the cost of survival gear and food and water supplies to last you many months. I've always stated in the initial start of this event, you will need to be in a cave that will withstand very high wind speeds, as well as room enough for you to store all your survival gear and food. But one thing I've never mentioned is, it would be advisable to have some kind of boat. Also, some survival tips from the informer, plus the informer to call it a day. Goodbye to Informer News and Cosmic News within weeks, and CDC hints that Ebola virus could well be airborne, as CDC suggests hermetically sealed caskets for Ebola victims. Okay, into this week's news. This first report is a Cosmic News presentation. So with sightings of NIBIRU, or objects coming in with NIBIRU being reported from around our planet daily, it's time to decide if you want to survive this coming horrific event or not. From the beginning, I've always stated it won't be easy for anybody to survive this approaching destructive event. We just have to look around our incredible blue planet and the many sunken cities being located around it that bear testament to how destructive this coming apocalyptic event will be. To even try and survive an event that we will all witness very soon will be near impossible. But if you are fit, well, and up to the challenge, then I'm 100% behind you. The first step is to decide the best and safest location to head for, that is at least 1,000 feet above sea level, that has not got any volcanic fault lines nearby. Once you have decided on the location, you should spend many hours researching the best survival websites that This is Cosmic News. Timeline is Sunday, the 2nd of November 2014. Welcome along, my friends, to another edition of Cosmic News. Coming up in this week's broadcast, decision time. With sightings of NIBIRU being reported daily around our planet, it's time to decide, do you plan to survive this event or not? As many high elevation locations will become isolated and surrounded by flood water once the pole shift occurs. Now, if you have a boat, you could widen your exploration zone after the event by many miles. You could also use the boat for fishing as well. But the advantages of having your survival location surrounded by flood water is that you will be in a far safer location, less likely to be attacked by a panicking horde of people. We all know, or should know by this time, that this event will be horrific and off the scale in destructive events. And you must bear in mind that even if you survive it, you could